Okay, thank you so much. I hope you had a little break there. A couple of things I wanted to tell you before we get started with Bruce Hennis. The first is, two people asked me this morning what happened to Johanna's attacker. So, and I talked to her, and she's fine. He was prosecuted, convicted. He was convicted and sentenced to 27 years in prison with no parole before 27 years. But he will get out, and he'll be in his 40s when he is released from prison. So for those of you who asked, that was, that is the situation there. Second thing I was asked to tell you, we are trending. So good, thank you for that. Keep tweeting. We're all good. We're actually the #3 trending tonight, right now, so keep trending. We're all good with that. And with that, we're going to start this session on extreme crisis communications and best practices. I'm so excited to hear Bruce. Well, I've heard you, but I'm so excited to have Bruce Hennis here. I have his actual bio that he sent for me to read, which I am going to do in a second here, but I wanted to let you know this session is sponsored by the Public Relations Society of Akron, and they have been supporters and partners and sponsors of parts of the workshop for several years. I also want to acknowledge Ron Kirksey. Where's Ron? Who is the president of PRSA, and he's one of the people on the planning. He comes to the planning meetings, we eat donuts, that kind of thing. So Ron, PRSA, thank you so much. And we're glad to have Bruce here. I'm going to read what you sent because I want to make sure everybody gets, but I want to say one other thing. I've worked with Bruce. Well, I didn't really work with you, but I've known Bruce for, yeah, that's right. We've been on sessions together. We've talked about ethics at lots of different places. It is always interesting to me to hear the perspective of someone who deals with the people who have to deal with the news. So I'm a longtime journalist. I come at it from a news background. And Bruce is going to talk about the people who have to deal with the journalists, meaning the public relations people, the public information people, that kind of thing. So I'm going to read what you sent. Bruce Hennis is managing partner of Hennis Communications, one of the few firms in the United States focused exclusively on crisis communications and reputation management. Hennis Communications serves corporations, government agencies, nonprofits, education and healthcare institutions, as well as law firms and their clients that are on trial in the court of public opinion. With over 30 years' experience in communications, the firm's recent clients include ThyssenKrupp, Westfield Insurance, Akron General Hospital, and many, many more, including Kent State University, as well as scores of law firms, nonprofits, and municipalities. Bruce serves on the executive committee of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association and on the board of the Cleveland Leadership Center. That is the end of his prepared bio. I am here to tell you he's one of the most thoughtful professional communicators I have ever known. Thank you, Bruce.
I call it extreme crisis communications, and I define extreme crisis communications as situations that involve, there we go. I define it as situations where there are genuine threats to life and limb, where people are really, really freaked out. I mean, think about some of those reasons. I mean, it could be the active shooter situation, crashes, explosions, fires, tornadoes, bridges that collapse, and of course, as I mentioned just a second ago, the active shooter situation. I'm talking about Columbine, I'm talking about Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, and Chardon. And lest you think this won't happen to you at some point in your life, where all of a sudden you are in the middle of a national media maelstrom, if you will. A couple years ago, I was talking to the public information officer for Bluffton University. All right, how many of you even have heard of Bluffton? All right, oh, most of you. How many of you know where Bluffton is? It's in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. I mean, it's a very small college, very small university. It's south of Toledo, all right, but it's in the middle of the cornfields out there. I was talking to the PIO, and she said to me, she said, Bruce, you remember when our softball team was on the bus, and the bus went off the embankment. They were a traveling team. The bus went off the embankment in the Atlanta area, and the bus flipped over, and 7 people were killed. She said, you have no idea what it's like. She says, I come out of my office, And she said, in the back area toward the football field were about 15 satellite trucks. She said, I come into my office, there's a stack of pink slips about that high. She goes, I wasn't prepared for this. She said, I wasn't trained to handle this. I didn't know what to do. I mean, crisis communications, it's kind of like being T-boned in a car accident. You're driving down the street and all of a sudden, boom, somebody comes out of the left side and hits you and sends you awry. That happens to a lot of our clients, but one instance in particular a couple of years ago you may have read about was a situation where a passenger ferry boat carrying 350 people from lower New Jersey up to their jobs in the financial district of New York City of Manhattan. They're on this ferry boat. Ferry boat's going up, pulling into the dock. You know, people, like any other mass transit, that people stand up so they can get off the bus or get off the boat very quickly. The passenger ferry goes into the, I apologize for that. I've got a timer here and something keeps popping in there. The passenger ferry goes plowing into the dock at 10 knots an hour, and 350 people go flying through plate glass windows, over stairways, down gangplanks. It was as awful could be. 65 people got rushed to the hospital. 65 people actually, at first, were in stretchers, in neck braces, in the middle of the world's biggest media market. All right, well, the company that owns the ferry boat happens to be a client of ours. All right, we got the phone call and we helped them manage the incident just shortly after it happened. Again, in the middle of the world's biggest media market. We had people out there with cameras, you know, within 10, 15 minutes. It was just very, very ugly. The video that I'm going to show you right now, in just a second, this video, the audio that you're going to hear, captures the audio from one person's cell phone. What we did was we captured the beginning part of each voicemail message, and then we chopped off the message itself. But you're going to hear 1 hour's worth of messages that went to one cell phone, compressed down into about 1.5 minutes, all right? Now, the video that you're going to see to accompany the audio does not match the video. For insurance reasons, we weren't permitted to show you the video that we actually use for internal training purposes. So what you're going to see are just kind of some generic crisis situations. It's the audio that I want you to hear, because this is exactly the kind of thing that you will face when the day comes where all of a sudden you're in the middle of a regional situation or what perhaps might even be a national situation. Let me just pull this up here. There we go.
It's Mary Lou calling from WABC Eyewitness News.
This is Nancy Singer. I'm calling from Fox News Radio.
My name is Kyle with Flyers on News in New York.
This is Ivan Lee with 1010 Windsor Radio in New York.
This is Kathleen Foster calling from Fox News.
Hi, this is Matt Johnson with New York One News.
Hi, this is Michelle Son at the Asbury Park Press.
My name is Kevin Corey, calling from News 12, New Jersey.
This is Daniela Royes from Channel 7 WABC TV.
Wanda Prizanzano, CBS in New York.
Joe Kemp, I'm a reporter at the New York Daily News. I'm calling in regards to this accident.
This is Ted Mann at the Wall Street Journal.
My name is James Quealy. I'm a reporter at the Star Ledger in Newark.
My name is Casey Lindhorst. I'm a producer with CBS National News in New York with Charlie Rose, Joe King, and Nora O'Donnell.
Hi, this is Megan calling from New York One.
My name is Chris Dolmich. I'm a reporter with Bloomberg News.
Kirsten Cole, WPIX TV.
This is Christina from the Middletown Patch. This is Casey Lindhorst again with CBS National News.
Hi there, my name's Jessica from New York One News.
Hi, this is Kevin Schwab from Channel 9 News.
Hi, it's James Ford calling from WPIX Channel 11.
Hi, this is Caroline Lewis from New York Press.
This is Matt Flegenheimer. I'm calling from the New York Times. It's about 11 o'clock on Thursday.
One voicemail, that's it, one cell phone. All those calls in 1 hour, all right, and it got worse from there. All right, well, when the crisis hits, the media piles on, and it's not just the media, all right, who's going to be looking for answers. It's going to be your students, it's going to be your employees, it's even going to be passersby all pulling out their cell phones to take pictures and sending them up to Twitter and Facebook, and it's going to be Meerkat and Periscope. They had the bombing in, if you remember, the explosion in the East Village in New York City about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. Meerkat had just come out. Meerkat was broadcasting live from the scene of this blown up building before the media even arrived. I mean, that's literally the world we live in. Well, when discussing extreme crisis communications, I think I want to start with what I would call a counterintuitive concept. And that concept is this. You must understand that the fundamental job of reporters is not to inform or educate. Let me repeat that, because this goes against everything that you all learned in high school civics class and that you probably teach, Jan. The fundamental job of reporters is, in my opinion, is not to inform or educate. It is to tell stories, all right? It's to tell stories. And the way they what they do is, and what we find in our practice is reporters so often, especially ones that are in a hurry, take facts that we know to be true, facts that our clients know to be true. They take those facts and sometimes they throw a couple of the facts out. Sometimes they insert their own facts. Sometimes they reshuffle those facts. And what they do is they take what's left and they jam what's left. They shake them up and they jam what's left into what we call in our business story frameworks. These frameworks have names, and these frameworks have characters that inhabit each framework. For instance, every time you read about the men and women fighting in Iraq or Afghanistan, our brave soldiers, that tends to be told in the hero framework. All right, sports stories are often told in the hero framework. Stories about the rich man who falls from grace, about the good mother who becomes a bad mother, stories of honor, stories of dishonor. Overcoming the odds is a typical business story. Everybody says, no, you can't do it, but he or she brings a product to market anyhow. They overcome the odds. Almost can't pick up a newspaper or go online and not read an overcoming the odds story. Horse race stories have no horses in them, but what they do have are winners and losers. That's the way political stories are told. I mean, what are we hearing every day, all day long? We're reading the polls, stories about the polls, stories about other stories about the polls. Those are all horse race stories. But the storyline, the story framework that our clients get hit with, and the one that you're going to get hit with when somebody points the finger at you and says that you've done something wrong, is something we call the 3 V's. All right? The 3 V's. And the 3 V's stand for the villain, the victim, and the vindicator. The villain who did something wrong to the victim, and the vindicator who rides to the rescue. Probably 90% of our business are 3 V situations where somebody has been accused of some type of wrongdoing. And remember this, and this one is even more counterintuitive, all right? The media today is not necessarily out to get the truth. Now, that's not all reporters, but many reporters today are not out to get the truth with a capital T. All right? And it pains me to tell you that because I'm a Watergate baby, all right? I grew up revering Woodward and Bernstein, who I actually got to meet a couple of months ago when they were in Cleveland for a fundraiser. They were my heroes. They sparked tens of thousands of kids going off to journalism school to fight the good fight, all right? To tell truth to power, all right? To unmask corruption. But what so many reporters today, because of the speed of the internet, are not out to get the truth. They're out to get a story. They're out to get, what they're out to get, in too many cases, is to beat the competition. You know, it used to be newspapers never broke news. TV broke news. I mean, if it happens, if you read about it in a newspaper, when did it happen? It happened yesterday, by definition. All right, because of course the way the printing press works. But nowadays, there isn't a newspaper reporter in the world that isn't told by their editor, you don't leave that meeting, all right, until you put something up on Twitter. You don't drive off in your car until you put something up on Facebook, all right? All right, but if they put something up there and it's wrong, all right, with the idea we'll correct it later, that does my clients no good if 5 or 10 or 15,000 people have already seen the incorrect post or tweet or whatever the case might be. Because we all know the correction never has quite the same value as the original story. Unfortunately today, and again, I'm not trying to indict all reporters, all right, because there are still some wonderful ones out there who will settle for nothing less than the truth with a capital T, and wonderful editors out there. But there are newspapers in the country nowadays who actually compensate partially their reporters on the basis of clicks. Now, if you don't think that affects journalism, you're 32 years old, making $32,000 a year, and somebody's going to pay you, pick a number, 1/8 of a cent a click, 1/2 cent a click. You don't think that's going to change the journalism? The bottom line to what I'm trying to tell you here is this. Reporters today, too many of them, but it's a reality, are out to get a soundbite or a video clip from you that reinforces the role that they want you to play. So in other words, if they come out to the explosion, to the fire, to the accident, to the shooting, whatever it is, they're looking for a villain, they're looking for a victim, and they're looking for a vindicator, all right? You have the power to determine what role you are going to play, all right? And a lot of what I'm talking about today is to make sure that you stay in control of your own message, all right? So you're in control of your own message. So what does really work in a crisis, all right? Rule number one is tell the truth. Tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. Why? Because the truth always comes out. It may not come out that minute, it may not come out that hour, it may be 2 days later, it may be 2 years later in the court case, but the truth always has a way of coming out. And when they find out you've lied, and the they can be the reporters, can be any of your stakeholders, when they find out you've lied, you've destroyed your credibility, going backwards, forwards, not only yours, but the credibility of the organization that you work with. Number two, tell it first. Why tell it first? Because generally speaking, whomever goes first tends to determine the trajectory of the story. And rule number three is tell it all. We bang into our clients. Tell everything that you are legally, morally, and ethically allowed to tell. Otherwise, somebody else is going to be telling their version of all, and once again, all you're going to be doing is playing catch up to that. All right? I would suggest to you that in extreme crisis communications, when people really are freaked out, what works is no spin. And what I mean by that is simplicity, no jargon, speed and accuracy, specificity and solutions, transparency, compassion and concern, compassion and credibility. That's what works in extreme crisis communications. Just the truth with and tell it all with very, very rare exception. All right? Communicating, however, in a crisis, a real crisis situation, is different than normal public relations. And the reason is this. In a serious situation, when people are freaked out, all affected people take in information differently, they process information differently, and they act on information differently. In a catastrophic event, your every eye twitch, your every facial movement, your every passing emotion is going to resonate with a heightened importance to people who are scared and perhaps desperate for information. What the public wants to know is this. They want to know what you know. It's pretty simple. If you're police, fire, you work for government, you work for a company that caused the problem, they want to know what you know. And your challenge as a leader of one of those organizations is to give them the information that they need so that the public can take the proper steps that they need to take to protect themselves and to protect their families. Your goals should be as follows: to decrease illness, injury, and deaths, to execute response and recovery plans with minimal resistance, to avoid misallocation of limited resources, and to avoid wasting resources. And to do this, you need the community on board, all right? The fact is, in a crisis, good communications to the public is a necessity, not a luxury. Leaders are going to make the following crisis communications decisions. Leaders have to decide what to release, when to release it, how to release it, where to release it, and to whom to release it to. And a well-prepared leader is going to have a crisis communications plan and resources in place to minimize the number of decisions that have to be made in the moment. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about what's exactly in a crisis communications plan. I would suggest to you that there are 7 communications failures that kill operational success in an extreme crisis situation. Number 1, mixed messages from multiple sources. That is, multiple experts. In a crisis, people don't want to have to pick from A, B, C, and D. They want to be told by a credible source, this is what happened, and this is what you need to do. Rule number 2, information released late. If the public expects you or your organization to have information in a timely manner, you better darn have it. Otherwise, they're going to get it from somebody else, which means they're opening themselves to being taken advantage by people who are either trying to sell them something or people who have other unscrupulous motives. Number three, the third item that'll kill operational success, paternalistic attitudes, all right, particularly among first responders, police, fire, government agencies. Don't pat people on the head, all right, and tell them we've got it covered, because there's a pretty damn good chance that you actually don't have it covered, all right, or you don't have it covered very well. It's amazing. You treat people like intelligent adults, and they will often act like intelligent adults. And don't ever tell people don't worry in an extreme situation, because they're gonna worry. So don't tell them to do something that's actually not gonna happen anyhow. You know, a chemical truck, you know, overturns on the interstate and the plume goes up and starts to drift over the town. It's okay to say, you know what, this worries me too. Let me tell you what I know and what I don't know, but I'll get into more detail on that in a minute. Another communications failure, all right, not countering rumors in real time. And what that means is you've got to have a system set up in place so that somebody on your team is monitoring what's going on in Facebook and Twitter and Meerkat and Periscope and all the other social media platforms, Cleveland.com, Ohio.com, and whatnot. All right, number 5, what you must avoid are public power struggles, all right, between competing agencies. Number 6, another communication failure that can kill operational success. Don't over-reassure people, all right? If a truck overturns, if there's a nuclear accident, a biologic accident, don't over-reassure people, because actually you want people to be a little scared. You want people to be very concerned. You want them to be hyper-reactive, because that might get them to do what they need to do, once again, to protect themselves and to protect their family. And the last thing that can kill operational success is overconfidence. All right? Any of you particularly those of you who have military backgrounds or people who have taken leadership courses, you've all been taught you want to be commanding, you want to be assured, you want to set yourself up as an example. Even if you're scared, you want to make sure nobody sees that, because you want people to follow your lead and be commanding. We think this inspires trust, and it does for about 12 seconds. All right? Because what happens is when things go wrong, and they will go wrong in a bad situation, all right, you're going to lose all your credibility. Wait a minute, you told me everything was fine. You told me everything was handled. And it turned out not to be that case. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up on the wrong end of a lot of public ire if you falsely set up expectations. It's okay to share the fear. Once again, I'll come back to that in a little bit. There are 5 steps to communication success in a crisis. Number 1, to execute a solid crisis communications plan. All right, but that assumes you have a crisis communications plan in place. Once again, I'll come back to that toward the end of my presentation. Number 2, you want to be the first source for information. Number 3, you want to express empathy early. All right, I think it was Dr. Julie Gerberding, who used to be head of the Center for Disease Control, who said, you know, if you don't, she said, empathy is the door that opens your voice to the information you want to communicate. So if people can perceive that you actually care about them in a genuine human way, they're going to be much more willing to listen to anything else that you have to say. And if you don't do that, you've really lost your audience, because people won't listen to you. Express empathy early. I don't care what's going on. You have dead people, you have injured people. The first words out of your mouth better be, let's pause for a moment, let's think about those who were injured, let's talk about the families. It's got to come from the heart. Number 4, show competence and expertise. If you have a title and you're part of the official response, you don't need to give your resume. Nobody cares. All right, number 5, all right, remain open and honest. And what I mean by that is, if you work for a government agency, if you're police, if you're fire, if you're part of the official response, people automatically assume that you are lying or that you're withholding something. And as cynical as that is, it's the truth. I mean, I know we have at least one police officer in the room here today, and it kills me when I have to give this talk and have first responders in the room. You know, they're the ones who are running toward the bullets and toward the fire, while you and me, we're all running the other way. How can you not respect that? All right, but the world we live in is so cynical today that if somebody works for the government, they start off being the villain. All right, and what happens is, because people, your motives may be noble, all right, to try to, look strong and even withhold information because you don't have the whole story. But when the public finds out what you knew and they find out when you knew it, once again, and they will find out, you damage your credibility. The bottom line in crisis communications, once again, which is different than traditional public relations, is the faster you give up bad news, the better, because holding back implies guilt and it implies arrogance. Skip ahead here. All right, so let me talk about the first message in a crisis. What should that first message in a crisis be? Remember, the public's going to be listening for factual information. All right, you want to get the facts right. You want to repeat them consistently. You want to try to avoid sketchy details. You want to ensure that all the credible sources are all talking from the same song sheet. You want to try to speak with one voice, which is not always possible. All right, preparation counts. Your first official message as a leader in a crisis should contain the following 6 elements in this order. Number 1, an expression of sympathy or empathy. Number 2, confirmed facts and action steps. This is what we know, this is what we want you to do. Or this is the action we're taking. Number 3, tell them what you don't know. Number 4, tell them what the process is. This is what you can expect. The first statement might only be, we've activated our emergency operations center. That may be all you can tell people in the first 10 minutes of a critical situation. And let me tell you, you tell people that, I guarantee you it's going to be repeated 500 times by the media, social media, and traditional media over and over and over again. What we've heard from authorities is they've activated their emergency operations center, as opposed to, we have yet to talk to someone, they haven't returned our phone call, or something like that, that makes you either sound missing or like you're the villain. Number 5, give them a statement of commitment. We're here for the long haul. We'll be back to talk to you in an hour. Give them something they can hang on to. And then try to tell people where they can get extra information. Here's the website, here's the hotline, here's the 800 number, all right? Now let me drill down with a little bit more detail into that list that I just gave you. For the general public, you want to make sure that you are focusing your message at the 6th grade level, or even down as low as the 4th grade level. Some people in my business say you got to be down at the 4th grade level. How do you know what level your message is? If you've pre-written your message, you've got time to put it into Word, and you can select it, and Word for Windows will tell you what grade level your message is at. In other words, you've got to get it dumbed down, because when people are freaked out, they're not capable of processing complicated information. Number 2, you want to cut to the chase. Only offer relevant information at the beginning. Again, don't start with a lot of background, and don't spend time trying to establish your credentials. Number 3, give action steps in positives, not negatives. All right, please stay calm is fine. Don't panic, not so good. Number 4, repeat the message. Repetition implies credibility. Repetition implies durability. Number 5, create action steps in 3s. How many of you remember stop, drop, and roll? We all do. All right, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. People remember things in 3s, all right? I think it's hardwired biologically into our brain to remember those things. And then use personal pronouns, all right? We are committed, we understand. The use of personal pronouns can be very, very powerful in crisis situations. You need to avoid the following. You need to avoid technical jargon. You need to avoid condescending or judgmental phrases. All right? Don't insult your audience. You need to avoid attacks. Don't attack other people. Don't attack other organizations. Attack the problem. Avoid promises, don't avoid promises, but only make promises that you're sure you can deliver on. All right? And lastly, avoid humor. All right? There are a lot of people who do what I do, and they counsel people. When you get up in front of a group of people, tell a joke. All right? Break the ice. Bad idea in a crisis situation. Very, very bad. All right? Just don't do it. You know, it's not even about being politically correct or anything else. It's just not a good thing to do. All right? Working with the media, all right? Disasters are media events. You all know that, all right? And it's best to understand that working with the media not only fulfills your First Amendment responsibilities, especially if you're a government agency, but the media is also a primary way to enlist the help of the community as well as give them the tools that they may need to protect themselves. All right? One of the biggest mistakes that officials make is waiting to release information until all the facts are in. All right? In a crisis, people are starved for information. All right? And if you don't give them something, even a small little bite to eat, they're going to get it from somewhere else. All right? You just got to give them something, you know, and you couch it with, once again, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, which is much bigger. All right? This is preliminary. It may change in minutes, let alone hours, but this is what we know. Huge mistake to withhold information until all the facts are in. We saw that happen with, I forget which mining disaster it was. It was 5 or 6 years ago now. One of you may remember. It was the mining disaster where the people were in the church, all the families were in the church, and what happened with this one? And they found out from the mine that the couple of miners had been discovered alive. So of course they phoned that into the church. Can you imagine the uproar? People were crying. People were on their knees saying, thank God, our men are safe. All right, then the owner of the mine, about 15, 20 minutes later, found out it wasn't true, all right, that they really didn't know what was going on. And instead of getting that information into the church where the families were, all right, they withheld that information for hours. And as it turned out, all right, all the men in the mine were dead, every single one of them. Can you imagine how angry the families were? And it wasn't even mourning the loss of their husband. All right, they were focusing their anger on the owner of the mine, who frankly, and I wasn't there, I wasn't part of it, they weren't clients of ours, but from what I could tell, the mine owner did everything else perfect. It was textbook operationally correct, textbook crisis communications with that one mistake. They made the decision to withhold information because they didn't want to send people up and down like that. Big mistake in crisis communications. You must be prepared to address the following questions that people are going to have at the beginning of a crisis situation. What happened? Pretty simple. Are my family and I safe? What have you found that may affect me? What can I do to protect myself or my family? Who caused this? Who's in charge? Has this been contained? Are victims being helped? What can we expect? What should we do? Why did this happen? Did you have forewarning? All right. I want to talk now about panic. All right, and I'm talking about the kind of panic that you've all seen in the movies where people go, and they freak out and they run out and they trample one another. You know, there is such a thing as panic, all right? But panic actually, I'm talking about real panic, when people become totally irrational, all right, and their autonomic systems take over. But it actually doesn't happen the way probably most of you think it happens, where people are trampling over one another. We've seen some of that, you know, with the soccer stadiums and the hooligans in Europe and South America in particular, but it actually doesn't happen very often, all right? But when there are fires, when there are floods, when there are explosions, all right, what tends to happen is that instead of people running over one another and shoving, you know, women and babies out of the way, what people actually do is they shut down. All right, I'm trying to remember the woman who wrote the book. I'll try to think of the name of the book. I think maybe it was called Unthinkable. It's a terrific book. I think it's called Unthinkable. A woman, a reporter, actually went back and took about 10 or 15 different crisis situations. And she went back and actually analyzed the record. And one of the ones that sticks in my head was the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire back in the early 1970s in the Cincinnati area. This was a fancy nightclub in Covington, I think it was right over the border of Cincinnati. I want to say Covington, Kentucky. It was in Newport, Kentucky. Okay, I was close in that area. And, people were there. They got babysitters for the kids, and they were watching a band play and whatnot, and there were a number of different rooms. And a fire behind the band sparked the curtain to go up in flames. I want to say everybody died. Pretty much everyone died because they couldn't get out. They couldn't get out the doors. At that time, in the early 1970s, they didn't have the same rules we have today here about hardware that can't be locked from the inside. There are panic bars on those doors. There's an exit sign above every door. Before the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire, that stuff did not exist, or at least it wasn't mandated across the United States. But they literally found piles of bodies piled up against the door because the doors had been chained shut. Okay, now that shouldn't surprise you. It's sad, but it shouldn't surprise you because they were panicked, they ran out. But they found more people dead who were literally sitting at their little bistro tables who had just slumped over from the smoke inhalation. Because what happened was, they saw the fire, and when there's a certain thing with fires where they spark and they shoot, I don't know what the technical term is, when they were confronted with their imminent death, they shut down. Because that's what the brain actually does. The brain shuts down and people get paralyzed and they stop thinking. That's why flight attendants are taught in flight school that when the plane crashes and they're trying to get people out the door, they are taught to scream at people at the top of their lungs, "You move!" Exactly like that, because people will literally sit in their chair when the plane crashes and they don't move, because it's the way the brain works. The same thing happens with soldiers who are under fire, who are in the trenches. And that's why that's why soldiers and police officers are trained over and over and over again, that when they hear the gunshots, when they're doing something, when something happens and they're supposed to take action, they are actually trained over and over and over again to overcome what the brain does, all right? To run toward the bullets, to jump out of the foxhole, shoot the gun, instead of shutting down and cowering down. Because this, by the way, this is like 10 billion years of evolution. It's all biologic. We shut down. So I don't want to tell you that there's no such thing as panic, all right? There is panic. But the kind of panic that hopefully none of us will ever face, but the more likely panic that some of us are going to face is a little bit more manageable. And I want to kind of put it into a slightly different context. According to Peter Sandman, and I want to spell that for you, by the way, Peter Sandman, S-A-N-D-M-A-N. His website is psandman.com. Peter Sandman, in my world, is the guru of risk management communications. I mean, he's the guy who wrote the textbook. If you ever want to know, I always joke with my doctor. I always ask my doctor, "Who's your doctor?" Because he's really the guy I want to go see, because he's probably smarter than my doctor. All right, so if you want to know who my doctor is Peter Sandman. All right, and he really has written volumes and volumes and volumes on a lot of the things that I'm talking about. He said, so these are almost his words, he said if there is a nuclear explosion or the release of nuclear materials, say at the Davis-Besse plant out in the Toledo area, and the plume starts to head eastward toward Cleveland, maybe toward Akron area, all right? What's going to happen is the public is going to go out and immediately rush and buy potassium chloride or potassium iodine, which is the kind of thing you're supposed to take to make sure that the radiation doesn't get to your thyroid gland. All right, even if people, I'm telling you, if that happens, if the Davis-Besse plant goes up or leaks radiation, people in Columbus are going to freak out and they're going to run out and get those pills, even though the likelihood of the plume going south like that is between slim and none. All right? That's understandable. That's not panic. That's really just people doing what they need to do to protect themselves, even if it's not correct. Panic is when you run over your grandmother in your haste to get to the drugstore. When you back out in the car over it, that's panic. You manage panic by being truthful and realistic. All right? And that starts with telling all the truths, not just half-truths. Because once again, you've heard me say this 4 times already, the truth will come out. All right? You want an example of that? Just take a look at what happened a couple years ago at the tsunami in Japan. All right, TEPCO, Tokyo Electric, what the heck was it called? Tokyo Energy, whatever they were called, something company, TEPCO, all right? They had told people for years and years and years, we're safe, all right, there's no radiation, we have this handled, tsunami comes along, we'll be fine. They lied, all right? That's all they did. That was their way of managing people's, because of course in Japan, as you can well imagine, you know, they are much more sensitive about radioactivity as perhaps we are in the United States. You want an example of how to handle it the right way? The H1 pandemic crisis a number of years ago, all right? Even though the media beat the crap out of the CDC and the local boards of health, because if you may remember, the story changed every other day. First, as soon as it began to spread around the world, they said, well, pregnant women have to go get the vaccine. It's only for pregnant women. And then they said, well, now we need to expand it to over 65. And then it's people who are immunocompromised. Oh, and then a week later, we have to get all children that are under the age of 5. I mean, the story kept changing, all right? And still, throughout this whole thing, while it was a pandemic, all right, people weren't dying. I mean, they didn't know. The media was merciless on the CDC and on the boards of health, saying, you keep lying to us. You keep telling us things that aren't true. You keep changing your story. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you go back and analyze what the boards of health did and the CDC did, they did it absolutely perfectly. They said, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, and it might change. And even though that didn't satisfy the needs of CNN, I'm sorry CNN, and I'm sorry NBC and CBS, and all the other legacy media, and all the pundits who sit in their bathrobes and, you know, and type on the internet, you know, I'm sorry that you weren't satisfied, but they really did it the right way, all right? And the unfortunate thing, all my kidding aside, the unfortunate thing is we are going to have a pandemic again, probably in our lifetimes, all right? And it's going to be very, very difficult for the American public, for the public in the world, to accept the word of these government agencies at a time when actually they ought to accept those words. But that's the way to do it. You want to make sure that your early statements are sufficiently alarming so that you don't have to come back later with a different, but perhaps a much worse story. When you're realistic and you level with people, you're going to be in a much better position to say, it wasn't as bad as we thought it would be, rather than coming to them to say it was worse than we told you. You never want to be on that end of the equation. Another tip, all right, I'm sure you've heard public relations people say forever, make sure everybody speaks with one voice. It's important to speak with one voice. And it is. The problem is, it ain't going to happen, all right? Because nowadays, with everybody having a cell phone, and you know, everybody having not only a cell phone, but a camera phone, all right? Even though you may have a rule at your office saying employees are not allowed to tweet or put stuff on Facebook, or even perhaps to have a smartphone, they're going to be out there sending pictures up to Twitter and to Facebook and to their families and whatnot. So we tell our clients, yes, it's important to have a designated spokesperson, but knowing that even though you may have a prohibition against anybody else speaking in a crisis situation, you need to over-communicate with your employees and many of your other stakeholders because they're going to talk to the reporters anyhow. Your organization will not speak with one voice. All right? For truly awful, scary, and dangerous crisis situations, one of your goals should be to achieve a level of public concern that's commensurate with the active risk, or at least commensurate with what the experts think the risk might be, because the real risk may not be known. Your goal, and please, if you're taking notes, write this down. Your goal should not be to stop people from being fearful. Let me repeat that. Your goal should not be to stop people from being fearful. Your goal should be to help them bear the fear so that they can make the right decisions about their preparations and response. Don't panic is bad, all right, because you deprive people of the time they need to prepare. All right. Just switch here. Mistakes people make with the media, all right? Don't play favorites. If you have breaking news, make sure that you give access to everybody at the same time. I got to tell you, you give everything to Channel 3 instead of 5, 8, 19. You give everything to one newspaper, not to all the newspapers, they will find a way to punish you. All right, and they will. All right, don't attempt to tell reporters how to do their jobs. Let them do their jobs. Now, you can give them rules. You can stand here but not stand over here or whatever. You need to get credentialed. But within reason, don't try to tell reporters what to do. All right, if the crisis is huge, the national media is going to show up. Don't get starstruck. All right, and I have been on the receiving end of that. All right, I have received phone calls on behalf of clients from NBC and CBS, from the bookers for the Today Show and the morning programs and the evening programs. And I got to tell you, these bookers, these producers and bookers, they are the best in the business. There's a reason that they get paid the bucks they get paid and that they work for the best news gathering agencies in the world. Their job is to seduce you into saying yes, into giving them the interview, giving them the exclusive, and when they find out you can't or you won't, they have fallbacks. Well, can you give me this piece of information? Give me that piece of information. Can you confirm this? And what they try to do is they try to worm their way into your life. They get information. They share it with you. All of a sudden, you're beholden to them. What they're trying to do is they're trying to crowd out the locals. They're trying to crowd out the Beacon Journal and the Plain Dealer and the Cleveland Jewish News and Channel 3, 5, and 8. All right? Don't let that happen to you. You've got to remain tough. Remember who brought you to the dance. After they are long gone, they tell you, well, anytime you're in New York, I'm sure Miss Couric will be happy to get together with you. It's amazing. 3 months later, you get to New York, that meeting with Katie Couric ain't going to happen. Just doesn't work that way. Remember who brought you to the dance. It was the local reporters that were here before the crisis, and it's going to be the local reporters who are here with you after that crisis. Know beforehand that the media is going to expect equal access to information. They're going to want to have their questions answered honestly. They're going to want a timely release of information. They're going to want to make sure that you quash rumors quickly, all right, because if you don't, they're just going to continue to repeat those rumors. They're going to expect you to commit to a series of media availabilities. Quite often in crises like this, there's a press conference every hour, then every other hour, then every 2 or 3 or 4 hours, then once a day. Even if they don't know anything new, even if you have no news to report, to have a regular press conference like that is a great way to answer questions, put out fires, stop rumors, and corral the reporters all in one place at the same time. They will expect you to provide subject matter experts. They will expect their calls to be returned. So if you get that stack of pink slips, you better have other public relations or public information officers who are prepared to help you respond to those questions, many of which are probably very simple questions to answer. They expect that what you tell them is going to be accurate, and if it's not, that you tell them, or if it's close to being accurate, that you tell them that the information is preliminary and could change. All right, and they expect you to tell them if you don't have an answer and explain the process you are using to get it. They will expect a consistent message from your organization, and they expect to be treated with respect. All right, and keep in mind, all right, we know anecdotally, I'm sure there's studies somewhere, that say the media is more factual and less interpretive when they have more information. So the more information, and again, I'm going to talk about this when I talk about a crisis communications plan, the more information you can have ready and pre-packaged that you can hand to a reporter. I'm not talking about volumes. I'm talking about fact sheets. I'm talking about PDFs. I'm talking about basic information, bullets, that you can hand to a reporter in a clutch situation. The more likely it's going to be that that reporter is going to get the story right, and you're not all going to have to try to compensate for misinformation that's out there. All right, I want to talk about press conferences now and community meetings. All right. Generally speaking, at a press conference or a community meeting, there should be one main spokesperson, and that person should be kind of the ringleader, all right, for the entire event in order to maintain control. You might have other people on the panel or standing by to be subject matter experts, but generally you want one person there. Normally, we want to set a time limit. This press conference is going to last a half hour. This meeting is going to last 1 or 2 or 3 hours, whatever the case may be, so that you have the opportunity to more reasonably say to people, okay, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. That way you're meeting people's expectations. Okay, an hour ago they told me the press conference would be an hour. Now they're telling me it's coming to an end. So you're not disappointing people quite as much. You want to make sure that you carefully introduce all the people that are standing next to you. All right, either you can give the spelling of their name or make sure that the people over here spell their name. Unless your name is Smith or Jones. Hi, my name is Bruce Hennes. That's Hennes. All right, do that. Make sure everybody does that because that's key basic information. Make sure everybody gives their title. All right, open the news conference with a statement. All right, as I mentioned before, if it's something of critical nature, you're going to want to open from the heart with an expression of sympathy or of empathy. All right, give your statement. I always encourage our clients, if possible, try not to read your opening statement, or at least not the beginning of it. Try to talk to the people, whether it's reporters or whether it's 300 angry people. Try to talk to people and have a conversation with them at the beginning, if you feel like I'm trying to do with you right this second. Now, if you feel that you've got to read from a statement because it's been lawyered or because you want to make sure you use the exact set of words that were very carefully vetted and written out, nothing wrong with looking down and reading a statement. All right, although I prefer to kind of look down, scoop up a phrase or two, and then deliver it. But it's okay to read, but best bet in order to maintain control of an audience is to try to talk at least something that looks like it's a little more extemporaneous. Make sure you talk in plain English, all right, not geek speak, not technical language, all right? And be aware of the fact that you are running the show and that this is a performance. Everything from this line here, whether it's a panel here or just one speaker, this is a stage here. And I'm a performer on a stage, whether I'm teaching a class or whether I'm doing a press conference. This is a stage. So you want to make sure that you're aware of your body language, all right? If you just Google body language, on the internet, or power poses, all right, that stuff really, really works. I mean, standing in front of a group of people like this and talking to them and telling them how concerned you are is one thing. Standing in front of a group of people, maybe even standing aside from the podium so that you can talk to people. Square your shoulders, stand straight. Try to look a little bit bigger than you are, all right? Use hand motions. We tell our clients, always talk with your hands. It could be one hand motion, it could be two hand motions, all right? Because this looks terrible on TV, this looks terrible on TV, this looks terrible on TV, all right? It looks like I don't care, it looks like, all right? Because it's not just what you say, it's not just the words that you use, it's also the way you speak those words. Actually, the way you speak those words is actually even more important. Somebody did a formula, wrote a formula, created a formula that said 55% of the impression you make on other people is your presence. This is about the way people perceive you. 55% of the impression you make on other people is your presence. And by presence, I mean the way you stand, the way you move, the way you're dressed, the way you occupy space, the way your hair is cut. The totality of your being is your presence. All right, 38% is your voice energy. And only 7% is the content of your remarks. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Now, I have to tell you, I often teach a similar seminar like this to first responders, and I tell them, God forbid, you got a stack of dead kids, in the schoolhouse, and you're talking to 300 angry parents. It ain't going to be 7%. I mean, it's kind of a sliding scale, all right? But I've been doing this kind of work for 35, almost 40 years now, and never once in my career have I ever seen what you say be more important than how you say it. How you say it always trumps the exact words you use. And everybody uses this formula. Everybody does. In fact, you used the formula on me. As soon as Jan introduced me almost 45 minutes ago, an hour ago, all right, within 30 seconds you decided whether you like me, whether you didn't like me, whether you think I know what I'm talking about or I don't. I've spent the last 45 minutes to an hour either affirming your original decision or fighting against it because everybody makes up their mind in the blink of an instant. Am I right? In fact, some guy named Malcolm Gladwell wrote a whole book called Blink. It's been on the bestseller list, I think, for 3 years. If you haven't bought it, I just saved it $29.95 because the whole book is based on the formula that people make up their minds about other people like that. So think about that press conference, think about that public hall, that public town meeting where you're trying to reassure people, you're trying to convince people, you're trying to tell people something, all right? It's not just the words you use, it's the way you look, the way you appear. So that's why, that's the basis that I tell people, always talk with your hands. All right, the other reason for talking with your hands, all right, and you want to make sure your hands, by the way, are between here, between your chin and your bottom of your breastbone. Why? Because you're either being filmed in what's called a waist shot or a chest shot, unless you're the villain, when that camera angle comes in real tight, you know what I'm talking about, because and believe me, when they come in that tight on the bad guy, the TV people know what they're doing, because they don't want the hand motions in there. All right, if I'm doing an interview, say with you, sir, and the interview's here, my hand motions are going to be relatively small like this. But if the room's larger, my hand motions are going to be that much larger. I don't know if you've noticed, but my hands have been out here for the last 45 minutes to an hour, however long I've been speaking. Now you're paying complete attention to my hands, am I right? And they're entirely exaggerated right now. But were any of you paying attention to my hands over the last hour? Maybe you were, but the photographer was. But the rest of you weren't, because this is what you expect people to look like. All right, the other thing that's important are the eyes. Again, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have been trying to make eye contact with every single person in this room, all right, just for a second or two, because I don't want to freak anybody out by staring at you, all right, but I've been trying to just make an eye contact. All right, even in the back, where I can't see I can barely see your faces, I can see the outlines, but I know where your eyes are. I can look at each and every one of you. And this is back to biology class. The eyes are very important. When somebody makes eye contact with you, your brain interprets that as being trustworthy and being believable. So eye contact during a press conference or during a meeting is highly, highly important. Another technique that we use for these meetings is always know where your next question is coming from. And the way we do it is like this. So I'll see how, we're going to take questions right now. Hands go up. I'll go, okay, you, sir, and then you. And what I'm going to do is, as he gives me his question, I'm going to look at him, not make direct eye contact over and over, because I don't want to freak him out, creep him out. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to nod my head every so often to indicate to him that I'm listening, all right? Although if he's saying something I don't agree with, I don't want to be nodding yes, because that's not a good thing. But I want to give him the feedback and the respect that I'm giving him my full attention, all right? And I'm going to take his question. And what I'm going to do with his question is I'm going to repeat his question. And I repeat his question for a couple of reasons. Number one, it gives me an extra second or two to think about what my answer is. Number two, if I didn't like his question, I don't ever want to look at him again. I want to take the power away from him and give it to you, because if you've got the question, then I can give you the answer, all right? How many times have you been in a meeting where somebody asks a question and it's just a dialogue between the two people? Subconsciously, you're thinking, whether you know it or not, you're thinking, hey, what about me? What about me? How come they're not paying attention to me? You don't have the same buy-in as when I take the question from him and I give it to you. So I will address the answer to you. All right, so I'm going to repeat the question, and then I make the answer out for everybody. Then I'm going to go, okay, now you, and then you. And I'm going to do the same thing over and over again. And what I'm also starting to do is I'm starting to go left, right, front, back, male, female, black, white, the people over here who hate me, the people over here who like me, because I don't want any what I call false barriers to communications going on. I don't want anybody out there, I've got a problem up here. I've got to get you to do something, all right? That's my problem. I have to get you to believe me, to trust me, to follow my instructions. I have a job to do up here, all right? And I don't want any horse crap that stops you from doing what I want you to do. So if I know I'm going to get beat up, I'm going to get beat up anyhow. So I might as well make it fair. The people who like me, the people who don't like me. Again, just to make sure that I'm in touch with everybody in the audience. I want to spend just another couple seconds talking about eye contact and just how important it is. If you happen to find yourself being interviewed by a reporter directly on camera, it is incredibly important to make eye contact directly with the reporter. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Let's say you're interviewing me, okay? And the camera's right over your shoulder. I'm going to do the entire interview talking to you directly, eyeball to eyeball, even though right about now it's starting to feel a wee bit creepy, isn't it? Yes, it is. Because think about this. We're back to biology class. We never have a conversation with anyone eyeball to eyeball, do we? What do human beings do? We move our eyes from side to side every 3 or 4 seconds, all right? We don't move our head, we move our eyes. You know, even if we're talking to our best friend or our spouse, we don't go eyeball to eyeball because our brains are hardwired to interpret anything longer than 3 or 4 seconds as either being hostile or creepy. Think about what animals do. Animals, when they're getting ready to attack, they kind of stare at one another and lunge. Okay, well, again, it's 8 billion years of evolution. But if the camera is on you and you're moving your eyes from side to side every 3 or 4 seconds, you look like you're lying. All right, so you completely undercut your message. That's just, again, to underscore the importance of eye contact. The other thing I want to suggest to you when you're doing a meeting like this, and this is out of left field a little bit, spend extra money on a sound system. All right? I know that's not really communications, if you will, but I have seen more meetings completely destroyed when they try to cheap out on the sound system. Because if the people on the side and the people in the back can't hear every single thing going on up front, what are people going to do in the back? They're going to start talking to one another, all right? And as soon as people start talking amongst themselves, you've lost control of the audience. So spend the extra money and get a professional in to do the sound. All right, I want to give you some more tips for extreme crisis communications. These I took directly from, most of these I took directly from a crisis communications specialist by the name of Gerard Broad, B-R-A-U-D. Very, very smart man. Here are some of his suggestions. He said, the media show aerial, video, and speculate because no official spokesperson has come forward in a timely manner, especially even with drones nowadays. All right, number 2, social media becomes both helpful and harmful. On one hand, it can be a place for updated information. However, Facebook is often a place for ugly discussions, while Twitter is a repetition of both current and out-of-date tweets. Without an official spokesperson, the media is going to focus on interviewing students and employees. Some are going to be helpful and forthcoming. Others are going to fuel rumors. Number 4, don't let your website fail to give accurate and timely information. Number 5, stop living in denial and thinking it won't happen to you. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That means that on a clear, sunny day, you must write a crisis communications plan to guide you through the communications challenges that you're going to face on your day of peril. Stop saying that you don't have the time or budget to write a crisis communications plan. Some of you, many of you, at some point are going to be responsible for the lives of thousands of people. All right, the lawsuits that you're going to face after their injuries and their deaths are far going to exceed the cost or time you're going to spend on creating a crisis communications plan. A crisis communications plan, he said, is not a 6-page free document that you find on the internet. It must be a precisely crafted document that anticipates every twist in the crisis and the precise communication steps you must take. You should never be at a loss for what to say. Your plan should be filled with pre-written communications and statements that you can read to the media, post to your website, and put up on social media. Go beyond texting. Texting only tells people to take cover. The downside to texting is the panic and media attention that often follows. You want to manage expectations surrounding an emergency text message. People who get texts late get mad, and it could take as long as 20 minutes in a large area for all the texts to go out. You need to hold a traditional news conference as quickly as possible, usually within the first hour, and you shouldn't ad-lib your way through that. You should know exactly what needs to be said. And finally, he said, a bad or confused spokesperson undermines the credibility of your organization. A couple more that I've added, all right? Watch your tone. Don't use weasel words. Weasel words like, well, I'm sorry you feel this way. You want to run that by me again? You're sorry I feel this way? That's not an apology. Or my other favorite, mistakes were made. Yeah, by who? That guy. All right. You want to make sure you monitor what's being said, correct misinformation, and use hashtags, and of course, establish these tools and social media accounts before you need them. All right. I'm going to spend just a couple of more minutes. Well, Jan, actually, I'm going to leave it up to you. I've got 10 minutes. Mine says 20 minutes. It's not 20 to 3? 20 to 3. I have 20 minutes, okay? I can either do 10 minutes on case study on Chardon, or I can do 20 minutes of questions. Sorry to face you, make it 10 and 10? Yeah. Okay, well, let me just, give me a second. You all remember what happened a couple years ago in Chardon. This will be my quick case study here. All right, the high school shootings there. We received a call that day from the attorney representing the Chardon Public Schools, and we spent the next couple of hours developing key messages and working with the school superintendent, preparing him for the 12 o'clock noon news conference. By the way, I knew about that shooting at 8 o'clock in the morning. The kid shot the gun at 7:45 a.m. I happened to be home. I was on Twitter, and all of a sudden my Twitter account kind of blew up with tweets coming from the kids, tweets coming from parents, and I just sat there. I'd never seen anything like it in my life in real time. And within 1 hour, I knew the names of the kids. I knew exactly what was going on. Now, looking back, I found a lot of things that weren't true at the time. But what was happening was the kids were in lockdown. And what were they doing? They were tweeting and putting stuff on Facebook to their parents and their friends. What were their parents doing? They were sending it out to their friends and retweeting it and sharing it. All right, and what was the media doing the whole time? They were monitoring the whole thing at Channel 3, Channel 5, Channel 8, and in all the other newsrooms. It was like being in the classrooms, as opposed to 10 years earlier when they had the hostage situation at Case Western Reserve University, before there was such a thing as social media. All right, and reporters were literally calling. That was an 8-hour situation where the guy had taken hostages in the business administration, the business building there, the Peter, what's his name, building. Peter Lewis building, thank you. And reporters from the Plain Dealer, I remember, had gotten hold of a phone directory for that building, and were literally calling each room, trying to get somebody in the room to kind of come out of the closet, answer the phone, and talk to the reporter. Completely different 10 years ago. Shortly after the news conference, all right, we received a call from their public information officer whom we had never talked to, had never met, didn't know anything about, all right, who thanked us for our efforts and informed us that a local citizen had volunteered his expertise, and we were no longer needed. Okay. Shortly after that, we were contacted by the Lake County education officials, and we ended up spending the rest of the day assisting Lake Academy, where the shooter went to school. What happened in Chardon was truly a tragedy, and I do speak from the heart when I say I grieve for not only the parents of the kids who were shot, but for the whole community. The kids who were injured, the parents, I mean, the community was traumatized. The kids, the parents, the teachers. It was a horrific, if you've ever been to Chardon, it's one of those picturesque storybook places where nobody locked their doors. To have horror like that happen in the middle of it was unbelievable. But we can't wallow in pity, all right? There are lessons to be learned, cold, hard lessons to be learned. And my job standing up here is to be a teacher and to teach you what to do should something like that ever happen. So let me tell you what I think they did right and what I think they did wrong. The schools, the fire department, the police, the sheriff's office, the EMS, they had an operational plan. That plan was written. That operational plan was wonderfully executed. They knew exactly what to do. The kids knew how to lock down. The teachers knew what to do. EMS knew where to bring the gurneys in. Everybody knew what their job was, and they acted in a professional and flawless manner. It's also my belief, although I wasn't out there, what happened was our office is in Terminal Tower. It's an hour drive without traffic to get out there, so we did everything by phone because there was no way we could have gotten out there in time. So I didn't see this, but it's my belief the school did a pretty good job of communicating with the parents in the hours afterwards. All right, but the fact of the matter is this. As horrific as that situation was, they got lucky. Think about this. All right, the kid did not roam the hallways. He pulled the gun out, he shot the kids, he ran right out of the school. He didn't take hostages, he didn't roam the hallways. You know, the incident was essentially over 3 minutes after it happened. Now, of course, the kids didn't know that, police and fire didn't know that, but you know, it was 45 minutes later when he turned himself in. The second the shooter fired his weapon, he was the villain, because I already talked to you about the 3 V's story. All right, and the kids in the school were the victim. And because that framework was locked in so fast and so tight, the school could do no wrong. Now, just because you're the school doesn't mean you're always going to be either the victim or the vindicator. It doesn't mean you automatically get that role, because if you go back and look at what happened at Columbine and Virginia Tech, where there were multiple villains, all right, the school and the police were the villains in those cases. I mean, the school and the police got sued, got their rear end sued off, and they lost those cases. They became part of the 3V framework. So just because you're the good guy doesn't necessarily mean you get to hang on to that part of the narrative. But in the case of Chardon, the school itself were victims, and they were able to hang on to that. So with that as a backdrop, I want to talk about the schools that emergency responders could have done better. Number one, tell what you know when you know it. Don't withhold information for the sake of controlling the flow. It's going to come out anyhow, like I said before. If you want to be the go-to source, which you should want to be, you have to release information in an unfolding crisis even much more frequently than twice a day, which is what they did in Chardon. Gun went off at 7:45 in the morning, somewhere within 10, 15 minutes of that. They didn't say, there was absolutely nothing official from the school until 12 o'clock noon. Now, the news media wasn't waiting for the official story. What did the news media do? They went what's called wall to wall. Channel 3, 5, 8, and 19 knocked out all of their national programming, you know, the Today Show, Good Morning America, and they went wall to wall. And what are the reporters out there in the field doing? They were repeating every single rumor that they heard over and over and over again because they had a vamp. Do you know what vamping means? Vamping means is like tap dancing. You know, you're the reporter in the field, you have 3 facts, and you've got 5 minutes to fill. Here's what we know now. Shots were fired. We don't know how many shots were fired, but we do know that the shooter is, has been captured, shots were fired, and students were injured. We don't have the names of those students. We're trying to get those right now. I mean, what, they just repeat the same thing over and over again 12 different ways because they have a producer in their ear who's saying, keep going, keep going. If you're a reporter on TV live, you can't say to the public, hold on a second, I'll be right back. I mean, you can't do that. You just have to repeat stuff. So if it's wrong, you repeat that. And if there's nothing official coming from the school, none of that is going to get out. All right? By the time the response team appeared before the media at noon, they actually had nothing new to say. More importantly, you can take a lot of pressure off the real victims, who are the families, by releasing information to the media for them. Instead, they let the hospitals release the information. Number two, if you're going to do a press conference, take questions. Unbelievably to us, the school administration said, we're going to read a statement and we're not going to take questions. What? This is your chance to quash rumors. This is your chance to answer questions. Even if you don't know the answers, even if it's too early to release the names, you can at least tell people, I'm not going to repeat what I've said over the last hour, hour and a half. You know what I'm talking about. They refuse to take questions. I actually had this conversation with someone from Dominion Gas. Do you remember a couple years ago, some houses blew up in Eastlake, all right, because the gas going into them went out at a higher pressure and the houses blew up? So I said to the one of the executives from Dominion Gas, I said, you had a press conference after that event happened. He goes, yeah. I said, what if you had said to the media, we're not taking questions? He said, they would have pilloried us. And that's exactly what they would have done, and they would have deserved it. Chardon was able to get away with it because they were the victims. And the key part of victimhood is you can never criticize a victim. Because the minute you criticize a victim, what do you become? The villain. All right? In their case, they were able to get away with it. But in your case, you probably aren't going to be able to do that. Use the web. Neither the school nor law enforcement posted any updates on their website until 24 hours later. There was nothing on there. We went to their website 18 hours later. Here's information about high school graduation and the social and whatnot. There was media hitting them from all over the world. Think about how many questions could have been answered if there had been timely information posted on the web or on other social media platforms. All right? Your web and Facebook can be real workhorses in a crisis situation, and you can drive traffic to them by using Twitter. Posting information to those places promptly and guiding media can lighten the workload for your team. Number 4, remember that communication today is not just done through television, radio, and newspapers. You need to reach out to bloggers, influential Twitter and Facebook users, and even LinkedIn group administrators. All right? Number 5, for a big national situation like Chardon, you really need a plan B, where you can have someone assigned around the clock to staff communications, because you're going to get hundreds of calls from the media around the world 24/7. Number 6, remember, you're always on the record. Even if you're talking to a parent one-on-one, how do you know that parent didn't pull their cell phone out, hit record, put their cell phone back in here, and all of a sudden everything you say is being audio recorded? We live in a digital world. You should assume that every phone call you're on is being tape recorded, all right, especially in a crisis situation. And number 7, you need a crisis communications plan, which I will still talk about at the end of my presentation. I'm going to go ahead and stop right here. I know this kind of gave you a lot of information in a short period of time, but I've got about 10 minutes to take questions, and then I'm going to need about 90 seconds to talk about the handouts at the end, okay? Actually, do you want to start handing the handouts out, or do you want to, while we take questions? Okay, do me a favor. When you get these handouts, promise me you won't sit there and read them. All right, let me explain. I'm making it easier for you so you all don't have to line up and take the handouts as you leave to get you out of here quicker, okay? Questions? Anybody? In the back and loud.
Shame on you, okay? I mean, I graduated from here, and I really and you're very articulate, and you did a really fabulous job of saying what you had to say, but 80% of the people around here tuned you out about an hour ago. They're on all kind of different kind of media and stuff like that. So I just wish you had allowed much more time for questions, because this is really a great topic to talk about, but we have very few minutes to talk about it. My second point is, the reality of it is that what you're talking about is good, but in the real world, it's not working, because the legal community, the lawyers, I'm sure at Chardon, the lawyers said, shut up, don't say anything, don't say anything. You'll mitigate, damages that and they all do it, It's like these codes of ethics at corporations.
Let me talk about the lawyers. We often clash with the lawyers. It happens every day in our practice, in our crisis communications practice. And I have to tell you, we have gotten very, very good at taking a 2x4 upside the head of a lawyer and convincing them that while their training is to make sure to preserve evidence, to preserve the record, and not to say anything, not even an I'm sorry, because they may have to go to court in 2 years, we are very good at explaining to the lawyers and to the executives, the CEOs, the executive directors, the school presidents, the college presidents, that in the meantime, you may not get to court for 2 years, but in the meantime, you've got to maintain market share. And if you lose 10% market share and your donations go down substantially, what are you really going to win in court? I have to tell you, in non-criminal situations, 98% of the time, we are successful at arguing with the lawyers and making the lawyers understand that they've got to say something now. So I would disagree with you respectfully, sir. We actually have a great deal of success with lawyers. In criminal situations, we don't. When we've got an executive here, say a CEO who's done something illegal or potentially illegal, all right, and I'm going to the CEO, tell the truth, tell it all, tell it first, and the lawyer is saying, you do it your way, you do it Bruce's way, you're going to jail, you're going to piss off the prosecutor, those I lose almost every time. When somebody's freaked out about going to jail, they're going to listen to their lawyer and they're not going to listen to the crisis communications guy. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Have you ever thought about translating your crisis communication expertise for individuals who have been hurt and they really have a hard time expressing themselves? We've had examples at this conference. Traumatized individuals who worked with good journalists to get their stories out. But I know I'm a psychiatrist who works with journalists. I know my patients could really learn from what you have to teach.
Yeah, and the question is, have we taken everything that I was trying to teach you today, and I was talking to you as if you were the police, the fire, the government agency, the college president, the CEO. Have we taken this course material and tried to give it to individuals? The fact of the matter is, we have not, we get called by individuals every so often, but to be very candid with you, bluntly candid with you, our business model for our firm is very similar to that of a law firm. We're structured exactly the same. We're not lawyers, but we're structured the same way as a law firm is. And because of our overhead and our pricing, individuals generally find that they can't afford our fees.
Good lawyers do pro bono work.
Probably about 30, and you're absolutely right, and about 30, and Jan, you'll vouch for this, Probably about 30% of our practice is pro bono. I sometimes say to the people who work for me, enough with the pro bono. We have bills to pay. But we give it away a lot. But when someone calls out of the blue, it's very difficult for us to drop what we're doing, to drop paying clients, and to all of a sudden turn around because they look at our fees and they go, oh my God. Yes?
I'm really interested in studying communications plans specifically for school shootings, so I really appreciate you talking about Chardon specifically. But I'm wondering, you mentioned all the students were, tweeting and texting their parents. I'm wondering if that's kind of a new aspect that you're encouraging clients to consider when making a crisis plan specifically for, I don't even know how much you do this, but for school shootings, like, do you have someone monitoring what students are saying and what is getting out there?
Well, it's only been in the questions. Well, you heard the question because of the microphone. It really has only been in the last 3 years that we've really put a heavy emphasis on our crisis communications plans for social media and for the internet, because it just wasn't, even 3, 4, 5 years ago, it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is today. Nowadays, almost everybody has a smartphone on their belt. What we're still running into, particularly in the state of Ohio, we have a national practice, but particularly in the state of Ohio, is that CEOs are very reluctant to build any kind of following on Facebook or on Twitter for anything other than marketing purposes, because they're either scared of it or because they don't understand it. And the fact of the matter is, we finally figured out one of the other reasons. If you go to California, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, the whole East Coast, and Utah, you're going to find business owners are very quick to use social media and adapt to it, and it's all part of all their plans, and they're very comfortable with it. And the reason is all those but not in Ohio. And the reason that the border states are comfortable with it is because they have earthquakes, and they have forest fires, and they have tsunamis, and they have tornadoes, and on and on and on. In Ohio, thankfully, we don't really get a whole lot of that. But if you live in California and you want to know where the fire is, you don't go to channel 3, 5, and 8 to see, do I have to leave now or can I wait 10 more minutes? You go to Twitter, you go to Facebook. So yes, it's becoming more and more part of our, yes. Anybody else? No more?
I learned about the Wonder Woman and power stance. Do you know like?
Something like this, isn't it?
It's like.
Yeah, it's like this. Oh, that's right. The Wonder Man power stance here.
What is like the psychology behind that, or what makes us think that it gives us more confidence?
I can't quote to you chapter and verse of the studies that have been done, but I did read there was a very famous TED Talk that talked about that, and there's been some research done at Harvard about power stances and about body language. But I don't think you need a study to know that if I'm talking to you like this, and I'm standing in front of you saying, I really value your opinion, I want to hear from you, all right? And let's say I actually mean it, all right? What's my body language saying? Back off. Whereas opposed to standing in front of someone and with palms open, saying, I really am interested to hear what you say, and my head is moving in the right direction. I think it's just very commonsensical. Do we have time for one more, or should I talk about handouts?
Talk about handouts.
Okay, let me talk about handouts. All right, first of all, as you see up here, we have a newsletter, Crisis and Reputation Today. If you like what you heard here today and you want to continue your education, our newsletter comes out twice a month, and it is literally best practice link. No advertising, no spam. I promise we'll never sell or give your name away. If you want to be on that newsletter list, either give me a business card, give me your name and email address, print, please, no cursive writing. All right, an L or an I can't tell the difference anymore. But give me your name and your email address, or you can send it to hennis@crisiscommunications.com and just say, add me to the newsletter list. We've got about 7,000 people on that newsletter. Jan, you get it.
I get it. I've gotten it for years.
Yeah, we've got a 25 to 28% open rate, about a 30% click-through. So I think we're getting some pretty good numbers on that, because it literally is an extension of this class. Secondly, in the handouts, not the one you just got, but I think, Jan, you posted these online. There's something called Elements of a Crisis.
It's in the binder.
It's in the binder? Okay. It's called Elements of a Crisis Communications Plan. How many of you know what a business continuity plan is? Anybody? Just a couple of hands. Business continuity or business emergency plans are emergency plans that people enact when something bad happens. These are, generally speaking, the operational plans. So for instance, if the food bank, if there's a 3-day snowstorm in northeastern Ohio, the Greater Cleveland Food Bank has a plan to get food in and get food out. They have trucks they can rent and four-wheel vehicles and whatnot. They have plans. Same thing with schools. Every school in the country has a plan for active shooter. What do the kids do? What do the police, what do the teachers do? Those are operational plans. What most people forget is the communications piece. So here's the whole operational plan. Our piece is this. If the you-know-what hits the fan, what do you say, where do you say it, how do you say it, and who do you say it to? All right, because 4 o'clock in the morning is the wrong time to be going to your IT person to say we need a brand new homepage because we're about to be hit by 300,000 visitors. You know, a good example of that would be United Airlines, for instance. God forbid there's a plane crash tomorrow. You're not going to go to their website and see fly us to Hawaii. They have a web page that's already built, that's fill in the blank, that's ready to just go up there. You want to make sure that you don't want to be going to your marketing or PR person to say, do we have the Twitter accounts and emails for every reporter that's likely to want to cover this? All right. The other thing that a crisis communications plan has is it is scenario-based. So in other words, let's say you're a chemical company. We'll prepare you with the 5, 10, 15 likely scenarios, you know, truck overturns, plant explodes, whatever the case may be. Maybe you're a school. You know, what are the things that could happen in a school? Students riot on a Friday night. I mean, not that that could happen anywhere. All right, you know, but we'll prepare you for those statements so that if it hits the fan, that you know what to say in that first news cycle, that second, that third news cycle, so that you're not the villain. The other thing a crisis communications plan does is it establishes a crisis communications response team so that everybody on the team not only knows what's in the plan, and the lawyers have already vetted everything in the plan, all right, and approved everything, pre-approved everything, but if something happens and the college president or the CEO is in a movie for 2 hours and has their cell phone off, the low man on the totem pole or the low woman on the totem pole has the authority to enact that plan and get the first tweet out and the first Facebook posting. You certainly can hire our company to help you write that plan. Instead, I've given you a template for writing your own plan. But let me again warn you, a crisis communications plan is not an 8-page plan that you find for free on the internet. They take us about 2 months to write, to do it right. The second thing you got that was just handed out here is really pretty much most of my notes from the presentation that I just gave you, all those long lists that I read, because my job was to teach you how to do what I do, so I wanted to make sure you actually had the words here in your hands. The last thing that I passed out was I have a 4-hour version of this class. So there are a lot of things I didn't cover, but you will find everything I covered and more on this little handy-dandy card.
I love this card. I use this card.
I call it the what to do if you're accosted by a reporter card. I gotta tell you, I can't walk through downtown Cleveland without somebody coming up to me going, oh, you're Bruce Hennis. I saw you give a class 3 years ago. They will pull out of their wallet a dog-eaten card, and they say, this has saved my rear end. I get that almost every day of the week. All right. The last thing I want to tell you is, where is my last page? The last page is, again, if you like what you heard here today, I give these frequently. Not this particular seminar. This is actually, what you got today was the 4th hour of my normal 4-hour seminar. But I do them in half-hour chunks, a half hour. There's a half-hour version, an hour version, and a 2.5-hour version. You'll find a complete list of those seminars coming up. Some are free. Some are at the bar associations. You don't have to be a lawyer to attend those. But if you think you have someone in your life that needs to hear how to handle crisis communications, please go to www.crisiscommunications.com and then look for seminar and events and then find upcoming events on there. And the last thing I want to tell you is I want to thank Jan Leach, all right, and the Poynter Institute for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak at one of my favorite universities in the world. And I wish you all the best and drive safe. Thank you.